What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Massive Breakdowns Star Wars Beneath Twin Suns. This is a Star Wars podcast. We're going to be talking about Rebels Season 2. We had an absolute blast a couple weeks ago talking about Rebels Season 1. And the support from you guys on saying, like, hey, I actually really liked Rebels 2. It's nice to hear people talk about it was really, really great to see because I feel like it's honestly some of the most underappreciated canon material that we've got. So we were coming back to you with Season 2. And Kit Kutch and I were just talking about this. And we were like, holy shit, this is a good season.
Yeah.
Like, I think you literally said it best, but you were like, is this better than Clone Wars?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're trying to talk about like bad episodes, and it's hard to pick a bad one out of the season. This is honestly a really good season.
Yeah. As I was going back through, I was just like, boy, it starts really strong. It finishes strong. There's a lot of strong stuff in the middle. This might be like this is making definitely making the first 4 seasons of Clone Wars look bad by comparison. Like if you would compare this to season 2 of Clone Wars, you would not watch the rest of Clone Wars. You'd be like, oh, that must be a bad show. I'm going to watch Rebels instead. It's like, huh. I don't know what else to say.
It was honestly surprising to me. Like I'm so, because we just did all of Clone Wars and we rewatched it, and I like watched Clone Wars, watched Rebels, went back and watched Clone Wars again, and now I'm rewatching Rebels again. And as I was rewatching Rebels, I like was waiting for a bad episode and waiting for a bad episode. And like finally, like halfway through the season, I was like, holy shit, all these episodes have been pretty good. And I went to IMDb and I was like looking up the episode list. And I was like, okay, I think I know which episode is going to be the worst one this season. And I got to that episode, and even that was a good episode. And I was like, what the heck? It was crazy to me. It was every single episode this season. There was at least one part of it that I like absolutely loved. I think that was what really did it for me. It is sometimes in Clone Wars, there'd be an episode where there's like very little redeeming good about it. But even the worst episodes in this season, I can name one thing from every episode that I'm like, man, that was some cool shit. Or I really like that character, or I really like that plot point, or I really like that location. There was one thing in at least every single episode that I liked. And I was coming down the list and I was like, God, I feel like the worst episode in the season is like a 7 out of 10. And that's a crazy thing to say for Star Wars, because Star Wars, even season 5 of Clone Wars, which I hold as the pinnacle, like the absolute peak of Star Wars TV, even it has some not so great stuff in it. And it's just capped at the end by one of the strongest arcs I think that Star Wars has ever put out. But at the same time, season 2 of Rebels is capped by something that I think is at least on par with the Wrong Jedi arc, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like I know which episode is the worst in this season for me, but I feel a little bit like it's not like I didn't enjoy watching it. That's the thing. I'm like, this episode has problems, but I still had fun watching it. And that's like, I feel like that's just such a, like, it's not even a criticism at that point. I'm just saying, well, I had the amount of fun that I had was lowest at this point in the season. That's basically what I'm saying.
But still had fun.
But still positive. It was still greater than none. So it's there are a lot of episodes to get through. I feel like we need to dive into it. Just huge thanks as ever to our patrons and our sponsors for the support that has driven us to create this bonus podcast that honestly is just as much fun to make as the Destiny podcast. So, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to dive in.
In some ways, it's more fun to make because I don't have to edit it. I just slap it together and I post it out. It's like, if you hear me drinking in the background or you hear my cat yelling, it is what it is. This is a Star Wars podcast. So.
You get all the awkward pauses.
Yeah, it is really great. And if you are one of the very rare people I feel like in this community who only listens to the Star Wars podcast and doesn't listen to the rest of it, then introduction-wise, I am Mercules. Co-host is Kit Kutcha, as always. And as far as introductions go, I assume you're doing pretty well today on this fine Sunday?
I am. So I injured my foot last weekend while I was climbing a rope on a mountainside. These things happen.
Yeah.
So I've been limping all week. It's very painful. I got an X-ray. Like they're like nothing's broken. You just bruised everything inside there, including the bones. And I was like, oh, that sounds excellent. I'm supposed to go run another race this coming Saturday. So,
Ooh.
and then another race the week after that. So it's a busy month for me. I've not run in a month now because I hurt my other foot 3 weeks ago now. So, but I can walk today without a limp. That's the good news. And I'm choosing to see that as a positive, and I'm very happy. And I got my flu shot. So
it's just a week of improvement for you.
Yeah.
Improving your immune system and improving your physical health with your feet.
That's right.
It's funny that you ran a race. My fiance just ran a 10K on
nice.
A 10K trail race on Saturday.
Awesome.
And she's doing a sprint triathlon on this Sunday.
That's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, and then she's doing, I don't know, she's running another race next week too. But she wanted to do something 3 weekends in a row. So she is also doing a race 3 weekends in a row. I, on the other hand, will be playing Destiny. All 3 weekends in a row, which I'm looking forward to, and watching Star Wars all 3 weekends in a row. So it's pretty similar.
Everyone's happy, I think. Here.
But you do both, which is what's really amazing. You do the race and you play Destiny and watch Star Wars. So you're really the Renaissance man here.
Yeah, it's a lot. It occasionally taxes my sleep, but
you don't need sleep. Sleep is the most useless thing. All right. Well, we can go ahead and get into the episodes. I know you're pressed for time. It is a weird recording time for us, but season 2. So. Man, holy crap. We got to start, I guess, with our favorite arc of the season.
Yeah.
But I feel like that, I feel like there can't be any argument here. The Twilight of the Apprentice arc, the season finale of season 2.
So I'm going to let you pick that one because you talking about that arc is actually why I started watching Rebels.
Really, that's high praise. Did I really sing its praises that highly that you were like, oh, I actually should give that show?
You did, because I was like, well, we have some pretty similar opinions on Star Wars for the most part, and so I was like, well, if he liked it that much, it can't be bad. Like, he's usually not that wrong about anything in Star Wars, so I can't and if I'm gonna watch it, I feel like I have to watch the lead up. Like I can't go into it and just watch that. I need to watch the first 2 seasons to get to it. And at that point, I was just like hooked. And so here we are. But so just because I feel like it also deserves highlighting, and because I love the bookend effect, I'm going to pick The Siege of Lothal as my favorite, because so many seasons of these Star Wars shows that we've talked about don't really start off that strong. Like it's a good episode that they start off with. It's like it sets the tone for the show. But like when you look back, it's not like, oh, this was one of the strongest arcs in the show. But The Siege of Lothal was friggin' awesome. So,
well, in fairness, then why don't we let you talk about that first? Because my biggest problem is like when you start one of these episodes with the season finale, you like start at the end of the season, right? And then we end up working our way backwards a lot of the point. So since you like Siege of Lothal, which I was also going to agree with you, if you told me I couldn't pick the Twilight of the Apprentice, because it's almost cheating, right? It's like picking the wrong Jedi arc in season 5, right? Like it's just so good.
Yeah.
If I couldn't pick that, I would have picked Siege of Lothal, which, like you said, is amazing because it's the opening arc of the season and it's incredible. It's so strong. So why don't we let you talk about that one first, and then we'll go back to the end.
So for me, it feels like watching like the finale of most Star Wars shows. So I mean, just plot synopsis wise, essentially, we saw at the end of season 1 that Darth Vader has been called in. Tarkin has had enough of this shit. The Emperor is like, okay, the Grand Inquisitor is dead. You have failed to restore order. I'm sending in the big gun. And so Vader shows up and immediately is just like, everyone's life is going to suck until these rebels are found. And people are going to die, and I don't really care who. And he starts basically locking the planet down. It's really, I feel like this is just such a strong arc. Let me get the Wikipedia up in front of me here, because I'm like so excited. I'm getting things out of order in my head.
So before you do this, I would say like the one problem that Rebels has is it's hard to pick an episode out as a singular episode and be like, oh, if you just watch this episode, it would be great Star Wars, because like the characters are built up and it is a continuous story.
Yeah.
It's a lot more like Mandalorian than it is like Clone Wars. However, I really feel that if you were to take like the last 3 episodes of season 1 and then Siege of Lothal and combine them into a feature-length movie, it would be one of the stronger Star Wars movies that's out there. Because season 1, as we talked about, ends really, really strong with a really powerful arc. And it ends with familiar characters, too. This is what's so important about it, right? It ends with Tarkin, and it ends with Vader, and all this stuff. Like, if you were to combine those 5 episodes into a movie, which I think it would come out to about movie length, right? Like, that'd be like an hour and 50 minutes, or like a little under 2 hours. If you were to combine those episodes into a movie, I think it would actually be a really good, like, even as a standalone, like, you wouldn't understand some of the dynamics of the characters, but like, you could pick on it enough, right? Like, they're all archetypes. Kanan's an archetype, Hera's an archetype, you know, they're all archetypes. You could pick on it quick enough. I feel like if you watch those 5 episodes as a movie, it'd be a really good movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it really would. So, you know, with the Siege of Lothal, we've got Vader taking steps to draw the rebels back to Lothal if they've left, or draw them out if they're still there. Minister Tua is a bit hesitant, and he's like, well, you can talk to Tarkin about that. Which she is less than excited about.
For good reason.
Yeah. If we remember, when Tarkin arrived, he promptly executed 2 people. So, the Empire's big guns are very much in play here. They are taking the threat of these rebels incredibly seriously. So Tua asks the rebels for help. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? She assumes that she's about to be executed. She's completely failed in maintaining order on Lothal. And she is offering, vital Imperial information. She, obviously being a minister and the governor of a planet, has access to all kinds of stuff. And so this is genuine on her part. But, and I don't know if the episode makes this entirely clear, but it feels like this is also exactly what Vader intended to happen.
Oh, it definitely is. That's one of my things that I like about this episode is we talked in Clone Wars about like Anakin's plans are like, he just like makes the most ridiculous ass plan, and then it works because he's like Anakin Skywalker. And what I liked about this is that his like Vader plan is so reminiscent of an Anakin plan, and that it's so convoluted and ridiculous, but it just like works exactly how he expects it's going to work. Because like that was his plot armor as Anakin Skywalker, but now he's a villain and it works. It continues to work for him. Like, because he's a villain, they don't suddenly make him inept like some of the other Empire villains. Like, he has this ridiculous plot where he scares Tua and knows Tua's going to defect and plants a bomb into his ship.
Yep.
And spoilers, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, heavy spoilers. Because the first time I watched it, I was actually really surprised. I actually did not see that coming at all. Because there was no foreshadowing up to that point that that's what his plan was. But then they blow up Tua's ship and you realize that they fully expected this and it was a trick to like lure the rebels out of. But everything he does, he is portrayed as so competent and so scary. And even when he loses, you're like, man, how did they beat Vader? And then it's because Vader wanted to pretend to lose that battle to allow them to escape so that he could do something else further down the road. And I love that they played Vader that way in this season.
Yeah. It's the the confrontation. So this whole plan kind of unfolds, and the entire way the rebels, thinking that they've got one up on the Imperials yet again, as they've grown accustomed to, their arrogance betrays them, as it always does against the Sith Lord. And everything just goes completely wrong. And so they're attempting to escape after the shuttle explosion. And then Callus and the Imperial fleet have laid siege to the planet and are preventing any off-world travel to block the rebels from being able to escape. And then Vader uses the Empire's news organization to publicly claim that the rebels blew up Minister 2's ship.
Mm-hmm.
And just basically completely screw them on every front. So just to say his plan goes exactly as he intended almost understates it. Like it could not have gone more perfectly. Unless they had like somehow crashed and killed themselves. And so then, boy, that confrontation, like Kanan and Ezra feel like a chill, and like I also felt the chill.
Did it not? It like legitimately gave me goosebumps when he walked out, which is such a cheesy thing to say, and I can just imagine people like rolling their eyes looking at this, but you can't help what makes you react in a certain way, right? Like sometimes you get goosebumps listening to music or something. There were several times I actually noticed it this season. There were several scenes that literally gave me goosebumps this season watching them. And that was one of them. Vader coming out, and like you feel the way Kanan and Ezra feel. Because like they just beat the Grand Inquisitor. They just beat Tarkin. Like they beat some of the biggest bads that the Empire has to offer. And this thing that comes out, which they have no idea what it is, other than Kanan has, a suspicion. He's like, this is a Sith Lord. But they throw everything they can at him, and it doesn't even scratch him.
Yeah. Yeah. This fight is like anyone who had any concerns that about Vader like not being portrayed as literally the most dangerous person in the galaxy. I think this fight completely would eradicate any doubt. Like, he goes up against Kanan and Ezra, who have proven themselves pretty competent with the Force, with lightsabers. Like you said, they've essentially just waded through the Imperials to date with occasional trouble, but not much the worse for wear. And it's not even a close fight. Like at no point do you feel like they have any chance of actually defeating Vader in a straight up duel. At no point does it appear that they have the upper hand. And then like they get help. They even cheat, right? Like Sabine and I think Zeb throw thermal detonators and like blow shit up. And it like falls on top of Vader, like these like AT-ST walkers and stuff. And they're like, oh, okay, we got him. Nope.
He just lifts them off.
Yeah. And
like, all right.
Yeah. The whole thing is just summed up. The line, Ezra's like, if that doesn't kill him, what will? And Kanan's like, not us. Run. It's just like, yep. This is what we needed. So
it would have been a disservice to the character of Darth Vader to portray him as anything other than the equivalent of what Anakin was as a Jedi, right? And I think that a lot of people did have that concern that it's hard to have a show focused on people who the only way the show can progress is that they continue to win.
Yeah.
And then to bring in an enemy who should be unbeatable.
Right.
But they actually tread that line really, really well by making every time the good guys win, it's all a part of Vader's plan.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to do this. And honestly, it plays across really, really well. And then they bring back Lando Calrissian in the end of that first part as well, which he's only there, on the radio, but it's still Billy D. Williams, and it just tickles me every time Lando Calrissian's in this show. So that just
yeah.
I love everything about Siege of Lothal. It is honestly a really good opening arc. It's probably the strongest arc that opens the season I think that we've seen out of any of the animated shows. I can't remember a stronger first 2 episodes.
Yeah, I and that's why I had to pick it. I just really wanted to highlight, if you watch Rebels season 1 and you're not wowed, okay, watch season 2.
Fair. Yeah.
Because season 1 is they're kind of figuring out what the show is going to be, what they can do, what they can't do, how these characters are going to all connect. And then season 2, they're like, okay, we've got this figured out. Now it's time to execute on the plan. And the plan, evidently, is to make some of the best Star Wars content that exists.
Yeah, and they were given more episodes to do it. I think they only had 15 episodes in season 1, and they had 22 or something like that, or maybe even potentially more, because I think they actually counted the opening arc and the closing arc as a movie, and they played it as a TV movie. I think is how they did it, maybe. But it's I think it's 23 episodes or something like that total.
Yeah, 15 for season 1, 22 for season 2.
And that helped. They didn't waste any of those extra episodes.
No, there was no filler.
Yeah, which maybe that's the reason why Mando gets so much shit for having filler, is because this season as a whole, like I said earlier, every episode contributes something. Every single episode leads down the road to the next episode. There is nothing where you're you could have is there an episode that you feel like you could have removed it from the season entirely and it wouldn't have made a difference? I mean, there's got to be 1 or 2 of them.
I don't think that there is. I think any episode you took out, you would have had to make a change in a later episode in order to try to hand wave some of the things that happened. Even the episode that I consider the weakest, leads into other parts of the story and is so deeply connected that to take it out would be really confusing. If you just skipped it, you'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, you know what we'll do? Once we're done with the arcs and we've talked about our episodes and we go through every single episode, we'll be able to do a better determination. I think there's probably a couple that you could, but like you said, if even if you took them out, even if technically the story worked without them, you would still lose something in the later episodes having not seen it.
Yeah.
Because they tie things together so well. But anyways, back to Siege of Lothal. All we've talked about so far has just been there's still an entire second part of Siege of Lothal that is arguably almost better than the first part, because now we've got Ahsoka back in here and we've got Darth Vader attacking the fleet basically by himself because he's just an entire badass. So they get Lando Calrissian's droid to help him out. They make these little decoy buoys and they squawk the transponder of the ship that they stole. And they send them all to a bunch of different places so the fleet doesn't know where the ship is trying to break orbit. When they eventually do break orbit and they jump away, Constantine, who is apparently the most popular and wildly inept admiral that they have in their fleet at the time, because Constantine constantly gets beat by everyone, is like, well, they broke the blockade. And Vader's like, yeah, I know that was going to happen. Like, prepare my TIE fighter. And the guy's like, I don't understand. He's like, there was a tracker in that ship. Like, everything that happened, we knew was going to happen up to this point. Like, we expected you to be entirely inept and not stop them. So prepare my ship. And Vader goes off basically by himself to take down the entire rebel fleet, which he almost successfully does because he's Anakin, right? Like, he's Anakin under Darth Vader. And that's what I loved about it so much. Like, how many times do we see Anakin almost entirely wipe out a separatist fleet by himself.
Yeah.
And he now does that same thing, but to the good guys. I love that.
Yeah. It's so, and you realize how thoroughly, like, this wasn't them just being like, oh, well, we need them to escape. We're just going to pretend it's according to plan. It's like, no, in the first episode, he actually tells a stormtrooper offers to scramble ships to chase them. And Vader says, no, they won't leave the planet yet. Like, basically implying they're going to leave the planet in due time. And like, I intend for them to. And it's just like, you don't even catch it in that moment. But then on a rewatch, you're just like, oh, he knew the whole time. Everything was foreseen.
And the burning of Tarkentown thing too, where he's like, yeah, there's a refugee camp. And they're like, oh, do you think that the rebels are hiding? He's like, no, I know they're not. I just want you to burn it.
Yeah.
And they go out and they see that it's burning, and it, like, it sparks fear in them, and it sparks anger in them, and it sparks hatred in them. Like, he's pulling so many strings. He's operating on so much higher of a level than everyone else is, which is how Darth Vader should be operating. Like, Darth Vader is this menace. He's second in command to Sidious. I mean, behind, Tarkin and Sidious and Vader, like, those are the big three, right? And we've now got 2 out of the 3 involved here. Tarkin has actually stepped back and been like, this is a job for someone else. My plan didn't work. And now Vader's coming in and basically playing them like puppets.
Yeah. And it it works to a ridiculous degree. Like you said, Vader shows up and they're like, oh, a lone TIE fighter. Let's deploy fighters and blow it up. Like, who is this moron? And then he just wrecks them. Like, just absolutely destroys their squadron. And meanwhile, Ahsoka then, like, she senses him and she's afraid. And like, at this point, Ahsoka is the most powerful Force user that the good guys have encountered in the show. And so this is just like, oh, for the crew of the Ghost, who have largely viewed the Imperials as like an overwhelming threat due to their resources and their numbers, but not necessarily due to their skill or competence. And so this is, I think, like a real wake-up call for them, as if facing off against Vader wasn't. But there's just this entire sequence of events where it's revealed to them how overmatched they are. Ahsoka passes out when she senses Vader.
I love that scene, by the way. That's an awesome scene.
It is.
Where her and Kanan reach out, like, through the Force, because they're like, who is this guy? And they're like, well, I don't know, but the Force is very strong with him. Let's reach out and see if we can figure out who it is. And like, she taps into his, mind, basically, and so much hatred, so much anger, right? Like, in Kanan and Ezra described it earlier as like feeling cold. Like, the dark side radiates off of him so strongly that his presence is basically imposed upon you when he's in a place and you can sense him. And Ahsoka, like, gets a brief moment of like, oh shit, this could, like, Anakin. I don't even know if she necessarily thinks like this is. I think it's literally just like Anakin. And it shocks her so badly, and she passes out, and then it goes to Vader and his ship. And he like looks up and hesitates, and he's like, the apprentice lives. And I thought that was such a perfect way for the two of them to figure out that each one still was operating in some facet. Ahsoka's obviously not a Jedi anymore. Anakin is obviously now a Sith Lord.
Yeah.
But prior to that point, both of them had thought the other one was dead. Like, entirely dead. Obviously, in the end of Siege of Mandalore, Vader goes out and finds the wreck of the ship where Ahsoka died and just assumes that she was also killed there. But yeah, oh man. And then, of course, he talks to Sidious right after that and is like, the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker lives. And yeah, And that ties the last of the big three into this because now Sidious is involved as well.
Yeah.
Although he doesn't come into play until later seasons.
Yeah. The exchange between Vader and Sidious at the end of the episode is I mean it's momentous, right? So they discuss, not only does Vader confirm to the Emperor that Ahsoka is alive, but they say, oh, Skywalker's apprentice could lead us to other lost Jedi, such as Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Emperor orders Vader to dispatch another Inquisitor to hunt down these Jedi, and that's that. The Rebel fleet has been badly damaged, almost destroyed, and the Rebels have been sent a clear message that they are not welcome on Lothal. So.
And that's it, guys. You guys can just watch the rest of season 2 by yourself. That's all we need to say about it. We're done here.
Yeah.
But no, that's not even the best part of season 2. That's the beginning of season 2. It then proceeds to go through a series of very strong episodes until it comes to its culmination, which is, in my personal opinion, tied with The Wrong Jedi in terms of the best Star Wars TV arcs we've ever gotten out of anything ever. Is it coincidence that both of them deal with Ahsoka Tano? Probably not. She's a fantastic character. But the whole point of this episode is that they have now, over the course of the season, come face to face with 2 more Inquisitors. They've had to deal with a lot of stuff. They've realized that, at least in their mind, like, they can't continue to run and hide. They're basically being chased from place to place to place. They run into the Inquisitors everywhere they go. Like, at some point in time, they have to figure out a way to stop them. In a previous episode, they believe that if they meditate, maybe they can talk to Yoda. Yoda will help them out. He tells them to go to Malachor. Well, Malachor, some of you guys may remember from Knights of the Old Republic, which I actually have a question about this because they're bringing Knights of the Old Republic. They're remaking that game. Does that mean that that's going to be canon now if it gets remade? That's a big question to me because Dave Filoni loves Knights of the Old Republic and pulls a lot of stuff from it.
As he should. Knights of the Old Republic is phenomenal. I can't wait to play the remake.
Well, you have a PlayStation, so you're lucky. So it's a limited time PlayStation exclusive, which is pretty annoying. But long story short, they go to Malachor, which is the site of a Sith temple. And at the Sith temple, there's supposedly the knowledge they seek on how to beat the Inquisitors. Also at the side of the Sith temple, it was a battle 1,000 years ago where the Jedi attacked the Sith, and they basically activated a super weapon, which wiped out almost everyone who was there. But I think what it actually did is the survivors were turned to the dark side or something, and it was the spark that caused the Jedi Civil War. Is that I have never played Knights of the Old Republic. I only know what I've read on like Wikipedia, but I think that's kind of like the backstory of it, although that's not technically canon yet.
So I don't know about that part. Yeah. Can't comment on that part. I don't know. It was a long time ago that I played that game. Most of what I remember is that I really enjoyed playing Darkside Revan, tormenting every NPC that joined my crew, driving them all either to abandon me, turn on me, or turn to the dark side with me. And then eventually unleashing an infinite fleet of ships to conquer the galaxy. So it was a great game. That's my synopsis. And that's really all I can tell you.
Yeah, well, the long and short of it is that it's hard to tell what actually happened and did not happen because the only stuff about Malachor that is canon right now is basically the stuff from this episode. And a few other weird connections. So it's kind of hard to tell what is or is not, but the long story short is they go to this planet of pure darkness, basically, and they find this temple that has thousands of petrified Jedi outside of it. And they're very reminiscent of the beings from Pompeii that were basically killed by the volcanic eruption and became fossilized immediately.
Yep.
But they find lightsabers all over the place. They find a lightsaber that looks like Kylo Ren's, but it's green, which is pretty cool. And on this planet, they unfortunately also find an Inquisitor, which is horrible luck because it turns out he wasn't even there for them. He was there looking for Maul, who's been hiding on this planet for God knows how long, trying to get into the Sith temple, but he can't because it requires two people, you know, the law of two, right? Always two there were. It requires two people to get in the Sith temple. And so he hasn't been able to get in. So this Inquisitor, which is the eighth brother, which, by the way, we're going to talk about Inquisitors a lot this season. I love every Inquisitor that they've given us so far. Eighth brother, seventh sister, fifth brother, Grand Inquisitor, even the Inquisitor from Fallen Order, like, they're all fantastic. Every Inquisitor they give us seems to be, there's like a little bit of carte blanche with them where they can kind of do their designs in like a non-uniform way. And to me, it just makes them such cool characters. And it also helps that Seventh Sister is voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who is the wife of Freddie Prinze Jr., who voices Kanan, right? Which is a fun little bit of trivia.
Yeah.
So I feel like her as an Inquisitor, like her chemistry as an Inquisitor is really good.
So I feel like an important bit of trivia that I did miss saying that I think is awesome is that James Earl Jones returns to voice Vader. Mm-hmm. in Rebels for this season, and I think it's awesome because I mean he's just so good. He's just so good. So yeah, I think it's just important to give credit. He got very little out of voicing Vader the first go around, and I can only hope he was much better compensated this time.
Well, he also crushes it in this role.
He does.
Like, he's everything that you want Vader's voice to be. And he gets to display a little bit more of like the condescending humor that Vader kind of has, which is downplayed a lot. Or like a lot of people are like, oh, Vader makes these lame dad jokes and stuff like that. Like, be careful not to choke on your aspirations. But like, Vader has always actually kind of been that way. You just didn't get to see a lot of it because he had 10 voice lines in, you know, the first couple movies, like the original trilogy. But in this, he gets to play it really, really well. And like his absolute just freaking disdain for everyone who works under him because they're all so inept is on display the entire time. And I really like that too.
Yeah, you definitely understand, you know, at this, if you've been watching Star Wars this long, you understand why he doesn't feel bad about just randomly offing any given officer because they really are completely replaceable. All they exist to do is to push buttons and relay orders from the people who actually know what they're doing. And if they can't even do that, then they might as well be dead.
Well, I mean, and some of them apparently can't even do that. And this goes back to Siege of Lothal, but when they try to activate the tractor beam to catch Ghost and they accidentally catch Vader.
Yeah.
And Admiral Constantine like looks at the ensign and he's like, oh, don't worry, ensign, it's not your fault. And then he like walks away. He's like, but Vader won't know that.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's actually fantastic. That's how Constantine has survived so long. He just constantly blames people under him. But
that's the true art of bureaucracy right there. Passing the buck. So yeah, they're on Malachor, and like you said, they encounter an Inquisitor who's not there for them, and then Ezra hears a voice calling out in the darkness, a voice that is so familiar, but if you're not ready for it, takes a second to place. And then he steps out, and even though he's hooded and cloaked,
you know who it is immediately.
Maul is unmistakable.
I was so surprised the first time I saw this because there was like nothing. There was like no foreshadowing leading up to this at all. It was just a complete surprise.
Yeah,
he just shows up and he's like, yeah, you can call me the Old Master. I love his thing that he goes on where he's like, I was a Force user a long time ago. And he's like, well, you weren't a Jedi. He's like, no, I wasn't a Jedi. He's like, so you were a Sith. And he doesn't say, no, I wasn't a Sith. He goes on this long rant about how the Sith took everything from me. They took his mother. They killed his brother. all this stuff that we know happened in the Clone Wars TV series.
Yeah.
And he immediately makes the connection with Ezra, where Ezra is like, they killed my parents too. They took everything from me. And Maul sees that like spark of potential anger and rage and like ability to connect to the dark side. And it's like a switch flips in his brain, and he's like, this could be the one. Like, I can get another apprentice. I've had a couple, but I could have another.
Yeah.
And immediately he goes into like his little conniving Maul mode where he's like, ooh, I'm gonna lure Ezra into the Sith temple, and we're gonna see how this goes.
Yeah, Maul is nothing if not persistent in pursuing his goals. And anytime he gets even a shred of a scrap of an opportunity, he spins it into chaos and disaster for everyone else. And yeah, that's exactly what happens in this episode. So, Ezra and Old Master, as we shall know him for a little while, continue their journey to the Sith Temple. Even though Ezra wants to go back to his friends, but Maul is just kind of trying to like reassure him. He's like, "Oh, the Inquisitors and the Sith Masters are my enemies too. Like I'll help you and your friends, and you'll be safe with me." Absolutely. I am incredibly trustworthy. See all these reasons that you can trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And Ezra falls for it hook, line, and sinker. As he does for Ezra is just so desperate to connect with people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets him in trouble a lot. It gets him in trouble here.
Sometimes it works out.
Yes,
he connects with Hondo, which is fantastic.
His trusting nature often causes trouble in the short term, but long term, a lot of times, other people that are not Maul feel compelled to return that trust, to repay it in some way. So Chopper steals the Eighth Brother's TIE Fighter, which is awesome. He flies off, but the Inquisitor, I'm trying to remember how this plays out. I think Chopper like forces himself into the cockpit.
Yeah.
And so Chopper uses the fighter's laser cannons to knock the Inquisitor to the ground. So this is where we get into the one thing that some people have a big problem with, and that's using the spinning lightsabers to fly. Now, I'll admit that there are some physics questions that one has to ask there in terms of how the lightsaber blade is interacting with the air. But I'm willing to let it go for two reasons. One, it's cool. It's like, oh man, like it's building on, where Kanan is like, oh, Ezra's lightsaber with the blaster built into it is super cool. And then the Inquisitor had a cool lightsaber, and then I'm like, what if we take it a step further? What if they could fly? And it's awesome. And two, they're powerful Force users. Force users can use the Force to throw themselves very high into the air. In fact, I believe it's actually canon that a powerful enough Force user can, in fact, fly. Vader, I believe in the comics, actually flies at one point. It's just that most of the time, like, they don't need to.
That would be ridiculous. That would be ridiculous. The image of Vader just flying. You know what I bet it honestly was? I bet honestly they were like, we should have these guys be able to fly. And then they just had the same mental image I did, which is these guys flying through the air with their cape behind them like a giant evil Superman. And they're like, no, that looks fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let's just have them use their lightsabers to fly. Is there a way we could do that? Like, yeah, we could helicopter lightsaber them. They already spin, and they're like, all right, just do it.
Yeah.
Like, I legitimately bet that's where the process went, because I just had this image of Vader flying like Superman with his mask and his cape, and it seems so ridiculous that I think it would be much better if he held his lightsaber up in the air and made it look like the lightsaber was pulling him. I just always assumed it was like,
is it Thor's hammer then? Like,
yeah, like that. Doesn't that look less ridiculous in your mind? Like, that's really what it is. It's like Thor's hammer.
So I'm picturing it as more of like an overpowered levitation effect, where he's essentially like his hands are in fists at his sides, and he's like, his cape is billowing, and he just like levitates into like Magneto. Exactly.
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, that's much less ridiculous.
I'm picturing it as Magneto, where it's like,
that's floating though. I don't consider that like flying.
It's
flying as like horizontal.
It's floating with style.
Floating with style, sure. But regardless, one way or the other, I saw the helicopter blade thing, and like, I remember thinking like, oh, and then just like moving on with the episode.
Yeah.
Because part of me was like, they're Force users. I just figured they're using their lightsaber to channel the Force in some way that allows them to be like carried over longer. They're not shown to have the ability to fly indefinitely.
Right.
It's basically like an extended jump that holds them in the air.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they jump first, and then the lightsaber like carries them an additional distance. It's not like they like take off and fly to outer space with their lightsaber. Right. It's not like that type of thing.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just like, oh, neat. And plus, the first one we see do it, the eighth brother, is a Torellian Django jumper. So he's like Aura Singh. So they already have that incredible ability to leap high amounts. So to me, it was just like, oh, neat. Like one more thing that they can do. The spinning lightsabers are already just like ridiculous if you think about it in any practical sense anyways.
Right.
So it's like I had already suspended my disbelief, back when we saw the Grand Inquisitor in season 1. I didn't need to keep doing it.
Yeah. They carry the fight by inches, and you accept each new thing because it's not that much crazier than the last, and eventually you're flying with a lightsaber, and you just have to accept it and move on. It sort of fits. It just sort of makes sense at that point. So anyway,
we're letting that take away from this badass fight scene that comes after. Well, I guess we're skipping the part where they get the Sith holocron. But
yes,
basically they have to use their power of 2. He tells Ezra to like give in to your anger and hate, move these rocks, which is obviously a clear parallel to how they got into the Jedi Temple on Lothal. Right. But they have to move not one rock, but a series of rocks, and they're all incredibly hard to move. And the only way you can move them is by using the dark side of the Force, basically. So they get there. There's a holocron across a chasm. And Ezra's like, my master taught me this, throw me. And he throws him over, and he gets the holocron, and he comes back, and the whole thing starts to collapse. But the cool part is they get outside of the temple, and who's waiting for them but the 8th brother, the 7th sister, and the 5th brother.
Yeah.
Thank you, baby. Just my fiance brought me another beer. Isn't that nice?
That is just incredible.
That's top shelf service right there. I appreciate that. She knows I love her. She doesn't ever watch these episodes or listen to these episodes, but she knows I love her anyway. So.
Well, clearly she cares about you a great deal. Bring you a beer like that.
She also corrected me that the 3rd race that she was doing was a half marathon.
Oh, okay.
She sent me a text saying that, so I guess she could hear us talking about that earlier. So yeah, she did a 10K, a sprint triathlon, and then she's doing a half marathon the following week.
Wow, really? I mean, I don't know if that's harder or easier than a sprint triathlon. I'm scared to do a triathlon because I'm a terrible swimmer.
Well, a sprint triathlon is not probably what you're thinking of where you sprint a triathlon. It is a shortened triathlon.
Right. No, I know it's a short version. Yeah.
So that's what she's doing. She's never done a triathlon either. So she's testing the waters first to see if she got herself like a bike and everything like that. So
testing the waters. You went there.
Yeah.
Triathlon humor. So let's get back to the point, because we've got a lot to cover, and we have this has been a long show already. But these episodes are so good that they're worth it.
Also, if we have to split this into 2 parts, we have to split this into 2 parts. It's not going to upset me at all if we spend an hour and a half talking about the best and worst arc, and then we have to come back and talk about every other episode.
I think
it's not going to upset me one bit.
I think we're going to have to. This season is literally that good. I would hate to take time away and rush through the other episodes. I think this is going to be a two-parter. Fair warning to everyone listening. Okay, so yeah, they get the holocron. Meanwhile, Kanan and Ahsoka and Chopper back on the surface are interrogating the eighth brother, who they learn is hunting a shadow on Malachor. And I don't know if he reveals to them that it's Maul, but
he does not.
He does not. But they're about to find out. Yeah. So they get the holocron, right? They get out. Kanan and Ahsoka are approaching with the captured eighth brother. They see the temple opening. The Inquisitor contacts the other Inquisitors. And, boy, everything just kind of starts to spin out of control at that point. Pun intended.
Boo.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Hey, you get to make a triathlon joke. This is what's happening now.
I didn't do that intentionally, though. You knew what you were doing.
So Kanan and Ahsoka enter the temple, and Kanan makes a point to say that whatever's going on, it's probably Ezra's fault.
Yeah, which it is.
Yeah,
so.
It's entirely accurate. And Maul actually demonstrates some trustworthiness, levitating Ezra to safety and taking the Sith holocron from him. It's trustworthiness for his own personal gain, of course.
Yeah.
As is everything that Maul does, but...
Well, he wants the Sith holocron, and he wants potentially Ezra to be his apprentice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yep. So this is just another manipulation on his part. And then Maul and Ezra and Kanan and Ahsoka and the Inquisitors all come together in one massive melee. Basically, everyone except Kanan recognizes Maul. And I think Kanan gets the idea from the fact that both the Inquisitors and Ahsoka are not happy to see him.
Yeah.
Maul, meanwhile, is just like tickled.
Yeah, he's like, oh, this is great. This is fantastic. Yeah, because Maul at this point is like, we've seen Maul get like broken before. Obviously, when Savage Opress first found him. And he's kind of bordering on his like old crazy Maul self.
Yeah.
He's still clearly a scheming and manipulative Maul, but he's like bordering on his like insane Maul again. So to him, this is just like, oh, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
What a treat. What a treat. Two groups of people who hate me, not just one.
Yeah.
And yeah, but he does side with Ahsoka and Kanan because obviously at that point in time, it's the lesser of two evils, literally the lesser of two evils. One of the things I love about Maul, and this will get addressed much later in the show during the Twin Suns arc, which is actually the arc that this show is named off of. But he is the character that falls back into the same cycles again and again and again and again. And he never learns and he never grows. And every arc we see him in, he's doing the same thing to varying degrees of success, right? But every arc we see him in, he's doing the same things, right? Like he's trying to manipulate, trying to grow his power, trying to get an apprentice, doing the same things. And he is one type of character that we see that serves as the foil to the heroic characters. He serves as the foil to Ezra and to Kanan and to Obi-Wan and to these characters who do grow and who mistakes and who become different people over time. And Maul doesn't. He's such a constant. And I think that's really, really great. And it is, I'm not going to spoil it, but in the Twin Suns episode, that comes to a head basically. And it is like the definitive example of him not growing and not learning while another character did. And I love that so much. I can't wait to talk about that episode as well. But it just, us talking about him trying to get an apprentice again and him manipulating again and like him being who Maul is, like he is a constant character. And I love the character for that because every single time he shows up, it's a fucking treat.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of those characters that you love to hate to love to hate. Like he's dastardly and evil and competent and powerful, but he is, like you said, he's static. He shows up and you know what to expect, and there's kind of a comfort in that familiar evil, where you know that things are going to get chaotic and there's going to be, dark side shenanigans and manipulations, and probably something momentous is going to happen because he tends to be like on the periphery of important events a lot, and occasionally connected to but not in the center of them. And so typically when he shows up, it's important. He just, what you said about him not growing while the other characters do, I think is something that you can really watch happen in this show, because he starts off, I mean, he's quite powerful in comparison to Ezra when they first meet here, and even compared to Kanan. And he's a match for Ahsoka. Perhaps not quite a match, but close enough that were they to go at it again, it could go either way. Her defeat of him was not complete. It was a pretty close call the first time around. So, and you see that change as the other characters grow. And you see, Maul continues to be a threat, but he becomes a little bit less frightening over time as they kind of take his measure. So
He becomes more of like the sad old man almost that you actually see.
Yeah.
And because that's who the character is at heart. Like, that's why he's unable to grow. I forget what show it was that I was watching most recently, but it was something like, you are doomed to repeat it was actually Archer. I don't know how many people are still watching Archer, but the newest season has come out, and it's actually quite good. It's gone back to its roots. The original creator writer left, and they have a new team writing, but they're very much writing in his style, and they do a pretty good job of it. But there's an episode where it takes him back to the beginning of like what made him into Archer, the character. And if you know who he is, he's like a drunk and a braggart, but he's like very competent despite being drunk all the time. And it takes him back to the beginning where he's basically a nerd and like a little weenie. And it's like these flashbacks where it's showing his past trauma. And it basically says, it was actually a surprisingly deep message for this show, but it basically says, like, if you don't address the root of your trauma and you just keep trying to like treat that trauma itself, you are doomed to repeat those cycles over and over and over and over again. And if you never address what actually caused it, you'll never break free of that cycle. And Maul is that character. Like, Maul never addressed what put him in this situation. He just tries to fight his way out of it and gain power. And time again, he gets reset back to the beginning and he has to do it again. And it's reset. But as he ages, he becomes less and less capable of actually doing that. Right. And then he ends up where he is at the conclusion of Rebels, basically, where he ends up. So it is what it is. But I thought that was actually a surprisingly deep message. And I saw that in Maul, where he never actually, addresses like, hey, I'm an evil person. Why am I an evil person? Like, I wasn't born an evil person. I was made an evil person. Instead, he just keeps functioning in that same loop over and over and over again, instead of actually looking back. Like, we see the Grand Inquisitor do it, which in one of the other episodes this season, where the Grand Inquisitor comes back in a Force vision to Kanan, basically. But he is who he was before he was turned to the dark side, where he was a Jedi Temple guard, right? And we see that, and obviously Vader at the end of his death and everything like that. I guess Maul kind of does it, but we'll talk about that later. That's many episodes on that we have to talk about, but it's a really great characterization for all of those characters. What happens?
Yeah.
Post death or near death or anything like that. But
yeah, so we're nearing the end of this arc now, the Twilight of the Apprentice. Which, like you've said before, when an episode is named well, you just know.
Yeah. It's going to be good.
This is good. So the the Inquisitors have been driven off, but the Seventh Sisters left one of her droids behind to spy on the group, and learns that Ezra has the holocron. Now, meanwhile, they're inside the Sith temple. Ezra and Kanan are arguing. Maul is sowing discord in the group. Ezra is accusing Kanan of holding him back. This classic, temptation of the dark side stuff. Feeling like, someone has been keeping you from your full potential, right? It's just
feeling much the same way Anakin did.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the strong parallel right there, is a lot of the stuff he says mirrors what Anakin says.
Yeah. And it's very classic. So shortly thereafter, the eighth brother, who's decided he's going to go it alone and try to reclaim the holocron, while the other two are trying to play it a little safer, shows up. But Maul and Ahsoka drive him away pretty easily. And realizing that the Inquisitors are onto their plans, Maul advises that they split up into two groups in order to try to separate the Inquisitors and deal with them more easily. Maul wants to take Ezra, naturally, but Kanan's having none of that. However, Ezra is having none of Kanan. And so they go. Ahsoka tries to reassure Kanan here. She's like, "You've trained him well. He'll be fine." Kanan's got his doubts, I think. It's something that he has to address. But he's not going to address it here. So
I liked that what ends up forcing Ezra to actually address the fact that, like, hey, maybe Maul isn't such a great guy, is Maul just like cold-blooded executing the seventh sister.
Yeah.
Which actually was a huge bummer to me, because I told you I love the Inquisitors. I love all of the Inquisitors, but the seventh sister in particular, I really, really liked her character. I thought she was an awesome and, in limited screen time, relatively complex villain. I thought her just whole aura that she like brought to it, right? That whole like weirdly flirty but super tech savvy and also very competent style of villain. Just, to me, I think it's something that's pretty unique to a Star Wars story. Like, I don't feel like we see that type of villain a lot. So I loved it. She unfortunately loses to Maul, and Maul's basically holding her up in the air with a force choke and is like, "Okay, Ezra, like, execute her."
Yeah.
And Ezra's like, I can't. Like, she's unarmed. She's not a threat anymore. And Maul's like, it's a shame. And just kills her.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, damn it. Like, well, fuck. And yeah. And then Maul's like, next time you won't be able to hesitate. And like, he's already treating Ezra like, you're my apprentice. Like, let me give you an apprentice lesson. Like, next time, don't hesitate to kill an unarmed prisoner.
Yeah.
It could be dangerous for you or your friends.
Exactly. Yeah. It's classic Maul, right? It's just repeating the cycle from the Clone Wars. So they split up again. Maul tells Ezra to plant the Sith holocron in the temple's obelisk while he goes to assist Ahsoka and Kanan. It's definitely what he's going to do. So he does assist them at first. He engages the Inquisitors with them. Ahsoka damages the fifth brother's lightsaber as she and Maul are fighting him, and then Maul kills him as well. He is just having literally the best day of his life right now.
Yeah, this is the happiest he's been in a long time.
In decades. So the eighth brother is also not having a good time. Kanan damages his lightsaber. Realizing he's outnumbered, he attempts to helicopter away and is not successful.
The lightsaber breaks apart and he falls, which is weird because it's like, can't Jedi save themselves from falling? I mean, Ezra can't because he's not trained in it, but can't Jedi save themselves from falling by like force pushing the ground before they land? Does he not know how to do that?
I think there might be a limit to that power, and I think he might have fallen too far. It was a bit of a Wile E. Coyote moment. for him.
Yeah.
Which was pretty hilarious. So Maul openly claims Ezra as his apprentice, which takes Ahsoka and Kanan off guard. And in that moment, Maul strikes Kanan blind with his lightsaber. Ahsoka then jumps in, and they are dueling. And Maul reveals his plan in classic villain fashion. So this Sith temple is not a temple, as it turns out. It's a fucking battle station.
Which we all could have expected.
Yeah.
Based on the bodies all surrounding it and the fact that the ground looks scorched, it's like, we all could have expected that.
Yeah. So Ezra activates the obelisk, and he's greeted by this dark force entity, which I guess we call the Presence. And he says that he's seeking knowledge, but the entity tells him that knowledge is power, and begins powering up the Sith temple / battle station, which we can generally assume is a very bad thing in all caps. Elsewhere, Tano is driving Maul back, but stops when she notices that Kanan has recovered and has donned a Jedi Temple Guard's helmet and found his lightsaber. She mocks Maul. Then she taunts him that he'll have to actually defeat Kanan before he gets another chance to challenge her, which is fair given that she did beat him last time.
Yeah.
And so Kanan sends Maul over the edge while Ahsoka goes looking for Ezra. And unlike the Inquisitor, Maul does know how to survive a fall.
He force pushed the ground just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, oh, you idiot. This is not hard.
This is so easy.
So then it comes to the end game. Chopper contacts Kanan and reveals that another TIE starfighter is approaching. Tells Chopper to come pick him up. Up at the top of the temple, meanwhile, the Presence reveals to Ezra that the temple contains the power to destroy all life. Ezra's like, that's not what I wanted.
I only want to destroy some life, not all of it.
And then the Presence is like, well, perhaps our new guest will claim the power instead. So Ezra assumes that this is Maul, and attempts to warn Kanan and Ahsoka, but as he emerges from the temple, he finds literally his worst nightmare waiting for him. Darth Vader, lightsaber ignited, having just left his TIE fighter.
And he beats Ezra in like record time.
Yeah, it's like,
as he should.
Yeah,
right.
It's like casual.
He's no longer really playing around. He's like, I need this power. This is some real power. You are standing in my way. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And luckily for Ezra, Ahsoka's there and comes in. Which, by the way, there's like a scene, or there's like a line in the beginning where he's like, how did you open the holocron? Like Vader asked that of Ezra, and Ezra just like shrugs it off. He's like, I don't know, figure it out. I love that they do this because they do this so much during this show, where like there's a thing that the audience will be thinking, like especially not the casual audience, but like the I know a lot about Star Wars audience will be thinking, and they will have a character say it, and then they will have another character like hand wave it away. And I love that a ton because it's like they know that the hardcore is going to be, well, how did he do this? And they're just like, yeah, we know you're going to say that. Like, we don't care. It's not important to the story. Hand wave it away.
I think, yeah, no, that's a really good thing that you call that. So that's in writing, that's called lamp shading. And so it refers to like, Like there's this glowing like light bulb question. You're like, oh hey, and then they're like, actually, we don't have a good idea for that right now, so we're just going to put a lampshade over it. But we acknowledge that it's there.
Yeah,
We
which is
acknowledge
the smart thing to
this
do.
is a question. It's a valid question. We're not going to answer it right now. We're going to shade that lamp, and we'll come back to it another time, perhaps.
Which, unfortunately, the worst example of that is them being like, somehow Darth Sidious returned in the sequel series.
Oh, God, I know.
Which is like the worst example of lampshade ever, because it's like, that's like a core point to all of the movies, and you lampshaded the entire thing and then like never really addressed it. Like that is a bad example.
Yeah.
But in Rebels, they do it really, really well, because it's always little tiny nitpicky things that like don't actually matter, but you know someone would ask, because like I'm asking them myself in my head, where I'm like, hold on a minute, like that I don't know about that. And then they acknowledge it. And then another character, sometimes they don't even hand wave it away. Like sometimes they give a legitimate answer.
Yeah.
Or they give like a couple of possibilities, which I really like, because they don't just do it in this episode. They do it in a bunch of episodes this season. And I think that's Dave Filoni's like mind at work when they present him the story. And he's like, yeah, but you can't do that because of this. And then they're like, oh shit. So they're going to notice that. Like, we need to acknowledge that, and then, you know, push it under the rug and be like, look, we know that that's not how it works. Just let it go for the sake of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all that to say, what follows is one of the most emotional duels in Star Wars history.
It's potentially the greatest scene of animated Star Wars, and it's up there with the greatest scenes of all Star Wars. It really is. Like, the duel between Ahsoka, who comes in to save Ezra, and Darth Vader / Anakin is so emotionally charged and so well shot and so perfect in terms of how the duel plays out, all the way down to the final moments where she duels him, not quite to a standstill. Like, I think it's fairly clear even from the beginning that like Darth Vader is the more powerful opponent, and like Ahsoka manages to duel him as well as anyone ever has besides Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And so much so that she cuts a chunk off of his helmet, and you can see his skin underneath it. You can see Anakin's eye, which is obviously now yellow. And I love it so much, because he says her name. He says Ahsoka. And it is actually Matt Lanter. It is actually the Anakin from Clone Wars. It's his voice. And then, what is it? Does he say Ahsoka a couple times? And then he says something like she says to him, I won't leave you again. Mm-hmm. And he says, then you will die. And it's actually a mix of Matt Lanter and James Earl Jones' voice.
Yeah.
Overlapped. So you hear both of them at the same time. And oh my God, that scene right there, seeing Anakin's face, hearing him say Ahsoka in the Anakin voice from Clone Wars, and then her just like totally broken and being like, I'm so sorry I left. Like her, I think at that point in time, internalizing all of it and being like, it's my fault he fell. Like if I'd been there, he wouldn't have fallen, which is, there's an argument to be made that is true. Right? Like that's her, when we'll talk about this episode and part 2, but like she has a force vision, right? Her and Kanan and Ezra all meditate, and they all have their own separate force visions. And her force vision is the fear, is Anakin confronting her and being like, why did you leave? Like, do you know what I've become? I became this because you were selfish and you left me, which of course isn't fair, because Anakin became this because Anakin, right?
Yeah.
But she believes that had she been there, she could have stopped it from happening. And she says, I won't leave you again. And he literally goes, then you will die. And that chunk right there, it's like 20 seconds, is potentially my favorite 20 seconds in all of Star Wars. I cannot speak highly enough about how this entire scene plays out, how well shot it is, how well scripted it is, how perfect it is. And he reignites his lightsaber, and Ezra tries to run back in to get her, and she turns around and force pushes him out of the temple as the temple wall comes down. And then Vader raises up his saber to basically like strike her down, and then it just like cuts out.
Yeah,
and every single second of that is perfect.
It's so good. And the way that they build this fight is is amazing. It's like you said, right? They're dueling, but it's clear that Vader is the superior warrior. So they, he offers her mercy, right? He says, "We need not fight. The Emperor will show you mercy if you help us hunt down the remaining Jedi." But she throws it right back in his face. She's like, "You and your Inquisitors have already killed all of the Jedi." And she's still trying to deny at this point that it's Anakin. She's like, my master could never be as vile as you. And then Vader tells her that he killed Anakin Skywalker. That Anakin was weak and he destroyed him. She vows vengeance, and I think this is a great moment. She's going to avenge Anakin's death, she says, and then Vader says, "Revenge is not the Jedi way." And Ahsoka says, "I am no Jedi."
It's beautiful. It's poetry. It's poetry.
And it's just like, yeah, it's this whole just, having watched the Clone Wars all the way through first, it's just all of that history playing out in seconds. And they fight, and Ezra takes the holocron, and Kanan and Chopper arrive to try and help him get away. Meanwhile, Ahsoka and Vader are continuing to duel until Vader forces Ahsoka over the edge, off the temple. Kanan and Ezra are then trying to flee. Right, they want no part of this fight, which is the correct response.
Right, for both of them, yeah. Ahsoka is the strongest Force wielder, like you said, that the light side has, and she is getting, she cannot win this duel.
Yeah. But Vader is right there. And once again, I love that they don't hold back in making sure that you feel that Vader is more powerful than everyone around him. He grabs the holocron with the Force and starts pulling it. And Ezra and Kanan, both trying to keep it out of his grasp, are losing that fight. And the only reason he doesn't take it from them is that Ahsoka comes back, and that's when she hits him in the face, right? To even injure him, she has to catch him by surprise. And she hits him, and then he calls out her name. And it just...
And that's when we all start crying.
Yeah.
Right at that point in time.
Yeah. Ahsoka, me, you, everyone watching, the listeners at home just listening to us talk about it.
It is honestly super emotional.
It is, though.
Like, for anyone who really cares about Star Wars and has cared about the story and has followed these characters through a long period of time, it's probably one of the most emotional scenes in Star Wars. Star Wars isn't necessarily known, especially the new stuff, isn't necessarily known for like real emotional scenes. It's known for like scenes where you're like, okay, this is supposed to be an emotional scene, but it's written really weird and it plays out really weird. And that is not the case here. Similar to, it has every bit of the emotional punch. In fact, I'd argue more of the emotional punch that season 5's finale in Clone Wars had, where Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Temple. And there's like that beautiful scene of like the sunset and her leaving the temple and Anakin staying there alone. That's emotional. This, I feel like, surpasses that in terms of how much emotion you have.
Yeah. This is like the kind of the full circle moment there. Her leaving him. And then now she says that she won't leave him again, right? Those two moments are deeply linked. And I think that's part of why this scene does surpass that one, because it's standing on that one's shoulders. And then, like you said, that line, I won't leave you again, then you will die. And that's not the first time we've heard Vader say that line, or a line very much like that, right? In the original trilogy, the original movies, he says something along those lines to Luke. But it's just one of those lines that when it comes out in Darth Vader's voice, James Earl Jones, just like force choking the tears out of me here.
You're just pulling the tears out of your eyes with the force.
It is. It is. It's like I don't want to tear up. This is an animated show. It's an animated science fiction show.
This is like supposed to be. Dude, I don't know how Dave Filoni slipped this by like the Disney XD execs. They were probably sobbing too while they were watching it. But like, what this show is for children, I can only assume that like children just don't understand the themes
Yeah.
deep enough to like, they just think like, oh, cool fight scene, like one character gone, another character. Like that's the only thing I can assume, because this is deep. Like this is really, really deep and really, really well done and really, really well written. And Dave Filoni obviously wrote this entire scene. Like he has talked about how hard it was for him to write this scene and how many iterations he went through when he was writing it, and how many different endings he had and how many different words he had, and how eventually he cut out just a bunch of words, right? And just removed a lot of the stuff they were going to say and just left like the core things that mattered,
Yeah.
because he felt like anything else would just be not doing it justice. Like, how are you going to fill a fight scene between Ahsoka and her previous master, now Darth Vader, with just like standard battle talk?
Right.
You can't.
Pithy banter.
Right. Yeah, you can't. So he did such a fantastic job, but it's Dave Filoni. Like, we expect it from him. He, there are some bad episodes of his shows. Yes, it's true. But when he puts pen to paper and he puts his mind to writing a scene that he feels like deserves the best, he gives it the best. Siege of Mandalore, The Wrong Jedi, the ending of Rebels, which we'll talk about, in a month or so. And then not even that, but like that's such an emotional note, right? And then it closes from that. Kanan and Ezra leave. The temple explodes, seemingly like killing Ahsoka and Vader, right? Kanan is blind. Ezra is overwhelmed by emotion right now. And prior to this, like when they left in the previous episode, I was like, why are they making such a big deal about this? Like, for some reason when I was watching it, it like didn't hit me the gravity of what they were going to go do. But they're like talking about like, if we come back, or like maybe we'll see you again. And then I remember that Yoda told them like, if you want to destroy the Inquisitors, you have to go to Malachor. They think he's telling them to go to Malachor to gain knowledge.
Yeah.
They literally destroy the Inquisitors at Malachor. Like Yoda is doing his Yoda thing and seeing 6 steps ahead of everyone else and telling them to go. But they get back and they see, Hera and Sabine and Zeb and Rex and AP5 and everyone thinks Ahsoka's dead and Kanan is blind. And like, that's a second emotional heavy note, like right after it.
Yeah.
And you'd think had you first started watching the show, you're like, I don't care about any of these characters. But I feel like you really find by the end of season 2 that you really do care about these characters. And like that note hits pretty heavy too.
It does. It does. So one of the things that I love that season 2 continues, that season 1 started doing well, season 2 continues it even better, is there are episodes that in theory, like they didn't have to have, and they could have explained away later events in other ways. But what happens in those episodes is a lot of personal interaction between the main characters, where they deal with conflicts between each other, and conflicts within themselves, and doubts and things that are holding them back. And they grow. They grow together as a group. They grow as individuals. And then, they do a great job of weaving in everything that they're doing has some greater effect throughout the series and is connected to some other events and leads to something else. And so it never feels to me like filler. It always feels like this continuous stream of personal development, escalation in the rebellion. And it all builds to this final showdown.
It really is what you said. Like every episode gives something to the characters. And that's what I feel like Rebels did really well, is they're like, okay, well, this is like, it might not add to the greater story, but it adds to how much you care about the characters in the greater story. But let's put something into this episode that's really, really good. Like the gravity well interdictor, right? Like that is a dope ass piece of technology that they include in an episode, which really just serves as like character development for Ezra and stuff like that, right? Or for Rex and Kanan, it serves as character development. Or like Sabine's backstory of the stuff she had to go through when she was at the Imperial Academy. And they throw in like a dope ass bounty hunter and it's stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're going to have to talk about that interdictor at some point because it is important. One of the things that I love about that episode is that they don't hand wave away the distrust between Kanan and
Right.
Rex. You know, Kanan, when he and Rex first meet, do not trust each other for very good reasons. Well, Rex is fine with Kanan, but Kanan very much does not trust Rex. And, you know, at a certain point, Rex finds that quite annoying. From someone who's, you know, barely more than a Padawan, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. He's trained a little bit more since then. He's fought some people. He killed the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah. But Rex is used to serving under Anakin Skywalker, so like his bar for what a Jedi should be is fairly high, right? Like he's turned against Jedi who went to the dark side before, so he's not afraid to stand up and speak his mind. So anyway, but there's conflict. There's clear conflict, and they don't just hand wave it away and say, "Oh, they get along now. They're on the same team." No, they deal with it, and it's awesome. But anyway, back to Twilight of the Apprentice. I mean, it's essentially wrapped up here. Then we've got the sad ending with the good characters, where it was victory, but at what cost? As it always should be in Star Wars. Those are the best Star Wars stories. Victory, but at a price.
And then how much victory? Because the final scenes are Vader limping away alive.
Yeah.
Tano, which it shows you Mirai, which Mirai is like the bird that's linked to the daughter from the Mortis arc, which was Mortis arc season 3 in Clone Wars, but it was one of my favorite arcs. It's like a super trippy, weird arc. Well, the daughter represents the light side of the Force. She has this owl-looking bird with a tail that some assume she transfers into, some assume it's like her friend. When she gives her life to save Ahsoka Tano, the bird, the convoy, starts to follow Ahsoka around, right? And Morai is now considered like a sign of Ahsoka. So you see Morai flying overhead, and then there's like this really far off shot of like Ahsoka from the back, just her silhouette, like walking down into a temple, right? And at the time, nobody knew what that meant. Nobody knew if she was dead, if she was a Force ghost, if she was alive. Like nobody knew what it meant. And Dave Filoni kept that close to the chest for a long time. And actually the first clues where he did a limited series of trading cards for the company Top. And he hand drew, I think, 10 images that happened after she walked down. So they happened after the season 2 finale. He hand drew 10 images. And it showed her basically walking under the temple. Marai's down there and she walks through a river. And then the final images are she like comes up through the other side. And then like, I think it was her with like that wolf portal, you know, from the was it the place between time or whatever it is?
The place between worlds.
The world between worlds. That's what it is. The world between worlds.
That's right.
Which nobody knew what any of that shit meant at the time, right? So at the time you leave. And similar to myself, like I left because I was watching it the first time. I was like, holy shit, is she alive? Is she dead? And then they, of course, don't answer that like early in season 3. But, and then possibly worst of all, you have Ezra in his room staring at the Sith holocron and opening it with red light reflecting out of his eyes.
And don't forget, of course, meanwhile, elsewhere, Maul escapes in a stolen TIE fighter. Just can't keep a good Sith down.
Yeah, at least not for a while. But yeah, so.
Or a bad
Lord,
Sith. But whatever.
Just good Lord, like the ending weight of this season is incredible. How well it's pulled off is incredible. Like people are like, oh, Clone Wars season 5 is the pinnacle. And it absolutely totally is. This is right up there with it. This Twilight of the Apprentice is every bit as good as The Wrong Jedi.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we might be at about a point where I wanted to get to our least favorite episodes, but I hate to end on a down note.
No.
And this has already been a longer episode. If this doesn't convince you to watch Rebels, I don't know what will. But yeah, we've just spent like an hour and a half talking about 4 episodes.
And
I'm not even sad.
Yeah.
These are four of the best episodes of Star Wars that you'll ever watch.
Yeah. So what I would say is we'll call this the end of part 1. We'll do, Rebels season 2 part 1, and it will just be the Siege of Lothal and Twilight of the Apprentice because it's amazing. And we'll come back to you guys with all the rest of the episodes of the season because we didn't talk about it. But the thing is there's so many good episodes in this season that it would be criminal to not spend as much time as we could talking about them, because like we referenced a bunch of stuff, especially in Twilight of the Apprentice, that happens during the season that gets called back. I mean, I kid you not, if you look at season 2, right? Like say that, Siege of Lothal is a 9.5, Twilight of the Apprentice is a 10. I want to say that there's at least 1 or 2 other like 9 episodes that are just like standalone episodes in the middle of the season. And then probably almost all the rest of them are 8s. And then there's like 1 or 2 7s. And like, that's it.
I mean, I would almost say that both Siege of Lothal and Twilight of the Apprentice deserve a 10. I hate to put anything on the level of Twilight of the Apprentice, but I'd almost want to give it like an 11.
Yeah, it is that good.
Because Siege of Lothal, I don't have any complaints about. There's nothing about those 2 episodes that I did not enjoy.
So I'm looking through the list right now, right? First off, we have Howl's Moving Castle arc with the clone commanders, which is easily a 9 in my book.
It's so good.
We have
I just rewatched those 2.
Yeah, those are seriously great. We have Future of the Force, which is very close to a 9 in my book, specifically just for the ending. The ending's incredible. We have a Princess Leia episode. We have a Mandalorian episode. We have an episode with Zeb and Callus together.
I was gonna mention that one. The honorable ones, so good.
And then we've got Shroud of Darkness, which brings Yoda back in, which is easily a 9, in my opinion. It's such a good episode. And like, what is that? Like 6 episodes out of the remaining 18 that we talked about that could potentially be 9s.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be really hard pressed to not say that this is the best season of Star Wars animated television. Like, it feels like blasphemy to say it's better than season 5 of Clone Wars, but rewatching it now,
as a complete season, there's no argument, I don't think, that can be made in favor of season 5. Season 5 was very, very good. This is just better.
All right, guys. So that's what we'll do. We'll do part 1 here, and we'll do part 2, and we'll talk about all the rest of the episodes, because, man, we're going to need at least an hour and a half. We just spent an hour and a half talking about 4 episodes.
Yeah.
And we've got another 18 that we got to talk about. I mean, there's a good chance that this ends up becoming a 3-parter.
The thing is that, like, there just aren't a lot of episodes that you can gloss over in Rebels, because they're all good. So we'll see how many we can get through. We'll see if we can keep it to 2. But honestly, is anyone going to be upset if it's a 3-parter? I don't think so.
Yeah. And you know what we'll do? We will, I mean, I'm saying this without actually asking you if this is okay, but I would like to try to, I don't want to wait another 2 weeks to finish this. Like, I would like to get this one finished as soon as we can and out, because I feel like it'd be ripping them off to like make them wait another 2 weeks for like part 2 of this. I feel like we should try to, do it as quickly as we can, if that's all right with you.
No, yeah, we can see what we can schedule out. So we'll see if we can get another one out within a week. I think that's a reasonable goal. Yeah, that'll be part 2. It's going to be us being just silly excited to talk about Star Wars. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, and we'll see you hopefully pretty soon.
Peace.